Alan Simon. This is our next speaker. The saying goes that a good consultant wears many hats. In Alan Simon's case, one of those hats is actually a football helmet, which you might find a bit surprising since he looks more like a runner, which he is, than a football player, which he is definitely not, right? The reason we say that one of Alan Simon's consulting hats is a football helmet is that in his 28th and latest book, he uniquely and cleverly tackles, pun intended, the challenge of teaching the blocking and tackling fundamentals of management by basing 40 essential business lessons on 40 great stories from the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's a cool thing. So let's welcome Alan Simon.
Thank you, everybody. Got a question. All right, and hopefully this is a safe question considering we're in Pittsburgh right now. How many people here are big-time Steelers fans? Just quick show of hands. All right, okay. I do have to ask, because there are out-of-towners, anybody here hate the Steelers, which means you're from Cleveland or Oakland or Dallas. Is there anybody that would admit you hate the Steelers? All right, okay. Which is interesting because tomorrow we're in Harrisburg, which means we're closer to Philadelphia, so I can't wait to hear the answer to that question. So, all right. So here's the deal. For a living, I do what's called business intelligence and performance management, and I teach basic management fundamentals. The problem is, or the challenge is, management fundamentals are frankly one of the most boring things on the face of the earth. Not dealing with tornadoes or harvests. And you know what's interesting is I live on a farm up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I also spent 9 years out in Colorado, so I've harvested and I've dealt with my share of tornadoes. I do, like most of the other speakers you've heard and will hear, I work with executives and senior business leaders, and I work on how to move corporations. But one of the things I've seen time and again is when you come up with these grandiose plans and you have everything sound and you know what you're doing and you followed all the best practices and you're dealing with change, time and again, more often than not, unfortunately, plans like that tend to kind of fall apart because a lot of the management blocking and tackling, the fundamentals by the first-tier supervisors and the mid-level managers just tend to fall apart. So one of the things I've struggled with for a long time is how do you get it across to those first-tier supervisors and mid-level managers, these basic management fundamental lessons, in a way where they're not acting like it's, about the third speaking position after lunch and kind of dozing off a bit. And actually where they will, as I'll talk about later, they remember, these lessons resonate. And I had this wonderful epiphany watching the Super Bowl in Tucson. I'm living out a lot of times in Phoenix these days. So I was watching the Super Bowl with my 80-year-old father, and we're talking about all these great Steelers games from years ago. And it's like, hey, you know what? That would be the perfect backdrop for how to teach these management fundamental lessons, these blocking and tackling lessons. All kinds of great Steelers stories which segue into some sort of a management lesson. So what I did over the course of the spring and the summer, I wrote this fun book. I've written a lot of books. This one is by far the most fun. So what we're going to do to try to keep everybody's attention for the next probably 15 and a half minutes is I have with me 5 copies of the book. I'm going to briefly show you 5 of the stories from the book, and the first person who guesses what the equivalent business lesson is gets a copy of the book. Sound good? All right, good. So, we ready? Are we ready for some business and some football? You know what, though? Despite all this off-the-field drama, I see somebody raising their hand. Are you going to guess the lesson? Very good. Do you have a copy of the book, and are you cheating by any chance? Or okay, very good. That is exactly it. And very specifically, don't let off-the-field distractions influence or distract you from what you're doing. Just very quickly, one of my clients about 9 years ago was Quaker Oats while the PepsiCo acquisition was going on. And you talk about drama, and I worked with Quaker for about 9 months through one of those cold Chicago winters. That was a lot of fun. And actually, the winter lasted all 9 months, but that's another story. And I was very, very surprised and very pleased to see that the folks I worked with were consummate professionals down to all kinds of different levels of the organization. They didn't sit there in anguish over, oh my heavens, what's my job going to be? They sat, they did their job, they said, you know what, I'm getting paid to do my job. That is what has to happen. All right, 2004. We actually go back a year before, 2003. The Steel Curtain was no more. I mean, not only were the players from the 70s and the early 80s gone, they had a pretty awful defense. So, and not only that, they had a pretty awful record. So guess what happens? Dick LeBeau, who, as most of us know who follow the Steelers, you want to guess? Oh, okay. All right. So anyway, so Dick LeBeau, you can get first dibs at guessing. How's that? So Dick LeBeau gets rehired by Bill Cowher. He had been the defensive coordinator the last time they went to the Super Bowl in 1995. And he left to go back to Cincinnati, which is where his home is. He was gone for a long time. And guess what? Cowher says, hey, Mr. LeBeau, you want to come back? And Mr. LeBeau says, sure. What's the lesson? Brings him in. Don't be afraid to bring somebody back who may have left your organization. And I'm going to cover that a little bit more about that. Just because somebody left does not mean they are persona non grata in the future, okay? People come and go. It is just like they said in The Godfather, it's business, it's not personal. So if somebody leaves and they may be the right person for the job, feel free to bring them back. Okay, 1976, we're going way back. The Steelers have just won 2 Super Bowls in a row. It's the same team as the previous 2 teams, and they start off 1-4. They are horrible. Oh, and by the way, Bradshaw gets hurt. So, you know, season's gone, right? I mean, they're going to probably finish up 1-13. Back in the days, they used to play 14 games. But guess what? The rest of the season, the entire season, they give up a total, not one game, a total of 28 points. They have, as you see, 5 shutouts. 2 games, they only give up 1 field goal. 1 game, they give up 2 field goals. They give up 1 touchdown the entire rest of the season. Here's the most important part. They didn't fire everybody, the coach, the team, replace a bunch of players in the middle of the season. It was the same team that had gone 1-4. In fact, they had a substitute rookie quarterback years before Ben Roethlisberger did the same thing. They didn't make any radical changes yet. Somehow, Chuck Noll and his coaching staff were able to turn things around on the spot. What is the lesson? Yeah?
Allowing people to make mistakes and fail forward?
We'll give you that one. There's a number of different ways to turn things around. Sometimes the proverbial heads have to roll. It's just the way it goes. Sometimes you do come in and make sweeping changes. But you know what? Sometimes before you do all those things, you can revitalize things in place before you resort to the firings and the beatings and everything else. So there are ways to get things back on track without going too far down the radical path. And that's going to be very important. We'll talk about that in a second. 1991, but let's go back to 1969. Okay, Chuck Noll takes over. The Steelers are pretty much the worst team in the league. So the Steelers bring a bunch of free agents and a bunch of draft choices to camp. They get this linebacker, a free agent guy from Youngstown State, what's like an hour and a half or whatever, due west of here, or kind of northwest, due west, whatever. And you know, the guy, he tries during training camp. It just doesn't work. They have to cut him. But at least Chuck Noll and his staff, they do a good job. They go in. The way they say it in football is, coach wants to see you, and you bring your playbook with you, okay? That's just the way it goes in football. Any idea who I'm talking about, who this free agent linebacker is? Any idea? Oh. Say it. Say it. I heard the words. Even if you don't know the name, just say it. And not Al Bundy, the character, Ed O'Neill, the actor. Ed O'Neill, the actor, was a free agent linebacker with the Steelers in the 1969 training camp. He comes in and he wants to become the anchor of the Steel Curtain. Just wasn't going to happen. That's it. Thank you very much.
Alan Simon, let's give him a round of applause.
All right, those who got a book,
Simon.
we'll leave them in the back, okay?
Okay.